Welcome to Seggs Talk Radio, a podcast that explores kink and sex through candid and curious conversations. Join me and expert guests in exploring taboos and unpacking what it means to be sex and kink positive. Go check out our new website, sextalkradio.com. That is SEGGS talkradio.com. And I hope you enjoy the episode.
And the period on the pill isn't really a period. It's actually called a withdrawal bleed.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's not anything like why you have a period when you're not on the pill. And a lot of women are not aware of that.
No.
At all. So it changes your hormones pretty dramatically. And not everyone knows it lowers your testosterone levels, being on the pill. And I think a lot of women are not aware of that.
I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Butter. Butter Wellness makes external prostate massagers for men. They're extremely high-powered, no insertion necessary, and they give really incredible prostate orgasms. You can get 20% off by going to butterwellness.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS. Over 80% of women, including myself, cannot have orgasms from penetrative sex alone. That is why it is so important that we find sex toys that we love. Honey Playbox makes an incredibly wide variety of toys. They literally have it all. They have wands, they have clit suckers, they have thrusting toys. They have so many options. And what's really cool about Honey Playbox is they are very technology forward. Many of their toys can be app controlled in addition to the regular settings and buttons on the toy, which makes it really fun for you and your partner. Go to honeyplaybox.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS, for 20% off of your entire order. This episode of Seggs Talk Radio is brought to you by the HUD app. The HUD app is changing the face of modern and casual dating by giving users a really fun and flirty interface, and also it has bedroom features where you can select all of the kinky and naughty things you're into and show those to potential future partners. I personally love using the HUD app, and I think it's a great system for finding kinky people near you. Go to hudapp.com/sextalk. That is hudapp.com/SEGGS talk, TALK, for more. One of the many things that I love about Mochi Melt is that it is an overall luxury experience using it. It tastes delicious and it looks gorgeous on the nightstand. If you want to try out Mochi Melt for yourself, go to mochimelt.com and use code THEA, THEA, for 15% off of your entire order. I recently created an account on sensually.com. It is an online platform for people to seek out and offer sensual and sex-positive experiences. This can look like being a BDSM provider, a sex coach, a escort. It covers a wide range of themes, and you can really find what you're looking for. And it is completely free to create an account or to explore. To learn more and browse both in-person and virtual experiences, go to sensuali.com. I recently squirted for the first time, and it was a lot of liquid. That's why I'm so glad that I've since found Splash Blanket. They create incredible waterproof blankets for all types of fluids. They have them in a bunch of different sizes and textures, and they are truly incredible and very absorbent. Go to splashblanket.us and use code SEGGS for 15% off of your entire order. Okay, Dr. Cynthia Graham, welcome to Seggs Talk Radio. I'm super excited to have you here. I've been doing, specifically last 24 hours, more of a deep dive on some of your stuff and learning lots about condoms.
Yeah. Condoms have been a big part of my research.
Yeah. Would you mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit more?
Yeah, so I'm Cynthia Graham. I'm working currently just since last year as a senior scientist at the Kinsey Institute, and I'm a professor in gender studies at IU, Bloomington as well. Moved over from England just a year and a half ago.
Oh, so were you working with the Kinsey Institute from afar?
Yes, I was working. I was a senior research fellow. Okay. But the reason my first connection happened is I did live in Bloomington and worked at the Kinsey and in psychology, not gender studies, for 9 years, much earlier in my career. Wow. So I've come back.
Yeah.
Come back home.
So what drew you to this area of study?
The Kinsey or the area of research?
Both.
Both. Well, yeah. So the Kinsey is just the most amazing place to work. If you're a sexuality researcher, there's nowhere else like it. And actually Bloomington, the campus, is really well off in terms of sexuality researchers in multiple disciplines. So that's
cool.
I got into sex research in a kind of strange way. My research was on hormones and menstrual cycle. And that my PhD was on that topic.
Oh, could you share a little bit about
Yeah,
that
happy
work as
to.
well?
Yeah. I'd done 2 degrees before looking at menstrual cycle changes, positive and negative movement. And then for my PhD, I was really keen to do a study that looked at the effects of oral contraceptives, the pill,
Yes.
on women's sexuality. There'd been very little research.
This is very interesting.
And I did that study, and it did add on to my PhD about a year, as my supervisor said. But an unexpected finding was that it was a small subgroup of women reported, and we used daily diaries. The study was a year. It was a careful study. Reported reduced sexual interest and enjoyment. So not the majority, but a subgroup. And that's really when I switched to doing research on sexuality. And I also did sex therapy with couples and saw, again, around the same time, we're doing my PhD, I started seeing couples for sex therapy, and so never really turned back. All my research since then has been related to sexuality.
Yeah. I went from entrepreneur to sex podcast host, and I feel like I can absolutely not go back. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely.
A lot of work to be done. And it's a fun subject too. I mean, I think that's something that gets overlooked sometimes, is this stuff is fascinating and curious and
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Do you recall like what percentage of the women with the oral contraceptive?
Yeah, I do actually. It was roughly around 12 to 15%.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly, but roughly that. And then the other important thing to say is I followed that up with doing other research. One study was a big one with the World Health Organization done in the Philippines, Manila, the Philippines, and Scotland, in Edinburgh. So it was a large study, and we found exactly the same finding, that a subgroup of women, some women reported feeling sexier and more interested on the pill. And there are various reasons why that might be so, but it was a very careful study. Yeah. It was controlled, placebo controlled. And so, we found it. And then in other studies done at the Kinsey, and some done in Oxford in England, where I lived for about 18 years.
I mean, my understanding is, because I've tried various birth control methods, is that I think it's not necessarily with the pill, because you're having a period, but there are some where you don't bleed at all. And I feel like you're not. Do you ovulate on the pill? No. Okay.
And that's the main way that it prevents conception as well. And the period on the pill isn't really a period. It's actually called a withdrawal bleed.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's not anything like why you have a period when you're not on the pill. And a lot of women are not aware of that.
No.
At all. So it changes your hormones pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
And not everyone knows it lowers your testosterone levels being on the pill. And I think a lot of women are not aware of that.
And heightened testosterone increases the sex drive.
There's evidence suggesting that.
Sure.
Yeah.
The evidence are men. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, I tried a lot of various things and found a lot of hormonal birth control affected my mental health. And now, being off of it for 5 years, I'm very in touch with my cycle, and I find that specific times of the month are very dramatically different for sex drive, down to almost nothing, 0 before my period.
Yeah, fluctuations.
And so it makes sense that if those hormones are being messed with.
Yeah. The pill generally flattens out those peaks and troughs, as you were saying.
Right.
And there's a lot of evidence for that, going back a long time as well. But for some women, it seems to really affect their mood. And for others, their mood and or also their sexual interest. And it's interest particularly, desire, that's affected. Not necessarily sort of functioning, enjoyment, but interest.
Right.
Yeah.
So what has some of your more recent research been about?
So I said earlier, a lot of my research has been on condoms. So for it's actually the 25th year anniversary of a group that I've been working with here at the Kinsey. One of our researchers is in the University of Guelph, Canada. So we call ourselves the Kinsey Institute Condom Use Research Team, or CURT. The acronym.
Fun.
We started working together. This is the 25th year anniversary.
Where's the party?
And we're planning some events at the Kinsey.
Great.
Working with the director, with Justin Garcia, on planning those. And we started off, one of the members of our team was a student then, and she's now a professor. So 25 years.
Yeah.
And we really focused initially on condom errors and problems. And when we started our research around 1999, 2000, there weren't many studies on that topic at all. There are a lot more now. But we did a lot of research on that. And then we built on that. We looked at women's experiences using condoms because there was very little on that.
Of a woman applying the condom?
Exactly. Okay. Women applying condoms, but also women's experiences with how they feel when their partner is wearing a condom.
Sure.
That's also really under research. Again, more research now. We did qualitative studies, interview studies, focus group studies, and a lot of surveys as well. And we did research on lots of different populations. Yeah. So men who have sex with men, young college students. I don't think we ever did any research on older adults, actually, but we should have done. But we did a lot of research on that. And then we built on that and developed an intervention to try and improve not just condom use uptake, but pleasure during condom use. And improving the experience of using condoms because we know a lot of people don't like using condoms. So we've done quite a few studies on that now. And we're actually, a new study that we're just working on here in Bloomington is looking at applying the intervention to people who have visual impairments. No, we think there's no research on that from what we've done research. And so I did quite a bit of research in England on that topic.
So what are the main errors?
That's a great question. What are the main errors? Because people often think about breakage, right? And slippage due to doing things wrong. But actually, one of the biggest errors that we've found is not one that had a lot of attention before. It's incomplete use. Very, very common. So either taking the condom off before sex is over or starting sex without using a condom. Yeah.
And is this research related to STI contraction or no?
Yeah, what we've done, that's a good question. We've looked at whether or not the errors and problems are, first of all, related to inconsistent use. And so are people going to make errors and have problems, not going to use condoms as much? We found yes, that's true. And we have done some studies looking at us, not as much as the study I just finished in the UK. The papers are still kind of under review at journals. We did not find a big difference on condom use errors on STIs. But we were looking at STIs, we measured STIs.
Gotcha.
But the problem is that COVID really interrupted our recruitment. So it was a great study to do, and it was really well funded. The National Institute of Health Research in the UK. But COVID really kind of wrecked our plans for recruiting. Our recruitment was about a quarter of what we wanted. So still a good study. And we did find some big differences after the intervention on attitudes towards condoms.
Okay, so what's the intervention?
The intervention is a really cool one, I think.
Mysterious.
And it's so simple, but it's quite novel. Yeah. We think sometimes clinics kind of use this. The bottom line, what we do in the intervention is the main thing. There are other aspects. Is we give men and women, we've done the intervention with women, a condom kit containing a variety of sizes, shapes, textures of condoms and different loops. So we call that the condom kit.
Yes.
And we really have a variety. It's quite a selection.
I mean, in my mind, that almost, if a couple is exploring it, or a man and a woman, it seems almost fun in my mind. It's almost like, okay, well, let's try this other one. And, it brings this kind of experimental, playful.
That's absolutely how we introduce it. And we introduce it like that. We have a great condom instruction leaflet that's fun. We ask them to practice. Kit? Absolutely. Great. I'd be happy to. And I'll send you a slide of the condom kit because it's pretty impressive. We've done a number of studies. We've done pilot feasibility studies, and this last one was the big trial
with the condom kit.
With the condom kit.
Okay. Oh my gosh, this is cool.
And that's that's the main focus of the interview. We also though ask men to practice applying the condom and using it on their own. So during masturbation, not with a partner, which might sound strange. We've never found that men have a problem with that. Yeah. And they've really enjoyed it. But we do qualitative ratings as well as a lot of questionnaires, right, on attitudes and on intentions to use condoms. Errors and problems. We have a questionnaire that we developed on that. And what we're trying to do is have men find the condom that's the best fit and feel.
Totally. And then order more of those.
And exactly that. And so they're given, for a year, they're given the opportunity to order as many as they want. And what we found is they do, this isn't even out yet, this is still in our papers under review, but we found they do order the same condom over and over again. They find one that works. And they say things like it's eye-opening, and I never thought about using additional lube with condoms. That's been a really consistent. So that's what we're trying. We're trying to make condom use more fun.
Totally.
And more pleasurable. And there's definitely scope for that.
Yes.
So
and
it's
I'm very pro-lube, and there's not enough.
Yeah. And we've been so fortunate because we actually were able to, we were funded for this study, but we were very generously given condoms for free from manufacturers and lube.
Wow.
Unlimited lube.
Wow.
I know.
I noticed that in some of the research I was doing on you about oil-based lubes. Can you explain for the listeners once and for all, like what makes a condom break down? Yeah,
it basically you don't want to use oil-based lubricants. That's the bottom line. You don't.
What would an oil-based lubricant be?
Oh, something like, people would use baby oil often. We found in early studies.
Sure.
That's
coconut oil.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We don't find that a very common error because it seems that a lot of people know about that.
Sure.
Some of the other, putting the condom on the wrong way around and flipping it around. Other errors, which are pretty big errors, we found were not common. So reusing condoms, uncommon.
Great.
Uncommon.
Good.
Yep, great. Good to know. But that incomplete use one was very common.
I guess my question is, why is that an error? It seems like it's a different category of error.
Well, that's an interesting. It is an error because you're not using condoms from start to finish of sex.
Right.
But it's linked to problems. So errors and problems different. So one of the main reasons that people take condoms off before sex is over or put condoms on after it started is because of erection associated problems that they report are due to condoms. So that's a really common one.
Yeah. Okay.
Or irritation, discomfort. Women report feeling like the condom dries them out. This is again without using.
I was just going to say.
Yeah. I mean, lube is great.
I mean, I've been trying to spread the word in the sense that I've experienced women that I talk to that have shame for not being as wet as they're supposed to be, which is also kind of a myth. And from what I know, like your lubrication is not correlated to arousal, basically.
Yes.
And
not at all.
Wanting women to feel empowered to just use lube. And ever since I started, which is all very relatively new in the last year, like actively incorporating it to sex, it's much better. Yeah.
And that's what we found in our studies. And it's such a simple thing, really.
It is.
And our intervention is basically pretty simple as well. But we have found that, this is in England because that's where I did the trial, that clinics are starting to incorporate just being able to, sometimes they have the condoms, they just don't give out more than one type. And we also include a fit kit with the condom kit where they can size what condom they should be using. A few condom manufacturers make those.
What does a size kit look like?
There are paper ones, but they're which we include in the condom kit. But there are also ones that are online as well. So that's a newer thing.
Do you just measure?
You measure the penis. Yeah. And length and width. And so there's one condom company that I'm not sure if it's still in existence, had 90 different sizes.
Wow.
I know. And there are a few now that don't have 90 but have a number. So the size, but also the texture and all of that is really important. The smell of condoms.
Yeah. No, I find that men that I've been with have their brand. They have their thing. And so while the intervention is simple, it takes trying out many different lubes and condoms to find the one. For sure.
And our study was really young men, 15.
Oh, wow.
15 to 25. And we did it in that population because STI rates are rising most highly among the younger population. But it's also good because they didn't have much experience.
Right.
So they were really
Starting
ready.
Them off right.
Start them off right. That's right. They enjoyed the study too.
Sure.
And they
probably
loved the condom kit.
Probably an open space for them to even talk or explore these things.
They did say that. I mean, they said after the practice period, they then were having sex with partners, most of them, not all, most of them. And then they said, they found it more playful. They found they could talk about it more because they'd had this solitary practice time.
Right.
Where they figured out what condoms they like best. So,
have there ever been issues with getting funding and research for these kinds of things? I'm assuming there's
It's not been as hard to get funding for this topic, for condoms.
Sure, that makes sense.
As it is for other things.
Right.
So the research I was talking about earlier, hormonal contraceptives and women's sexuality, that's been very difficult to get funding for throughout my career.
Wow. Why do you think that is?
I have ideas about that.
Do you think it's corporate?
I think it is partly that. And I think so it's difficult to get funding when people think you're focused only on negative side of it, which I never was. It was both. But pill companies don't really want to know.
Hey, we're going to have to pause for just one sec. This thing
I think it's again. Me. I'm bad luck.
No, it's not.
First I soaked my phone.
No. It happened with the last guest.
No, that's just there, not for actual acoustics, just to cover up some of the wall in the chat.
Cover up the wall.
I like it. It adds to the space.
You can see how much I use my hands when I teach. Constantly, so I'm really trying not to.
You can,
No, I have to do this or I use my hands, yeah. That's why I'm got them like this.
Okay. Where were we?
Funding.
Birth control funding.
Yeah.
Birth control research funding.
The study that we did with the World Health Organization, they were concerned about the findings when we'd finished the data analysis. This is a long time ago, but it was quite a big study, 2 countries, and they were worried about how it was going to be reported in the media. And actually, the media did pick it up in a way that was sensationalistic.
In what way? Like, what would the tagline be?
Yeah, I can remember them because I've talked about this in presentations over the years. So I did this study when I was in the UK, in Edinburgh, and the tabloid press in the UK.
I've heard.
So the headlines were things like, "Pill turns girls off sex."
Oh, God.
Or, "Not now, darling, I'm on the pill."
Oh, God.
Yeah. Chill pill, the chill pill. So it really sensationalized the negative effects. And
also made it this like... The way I see it is almost to the men of like, she's not going to want to have sex with you anymore.
Exactly. Kind of. Yeah. Not a good message at all. But so funding, I think, really varies. If you're doing work on STIs and condom use, it's not as difficult.
Sure.
As it's similar to, it's not the same.
It's like public health issue.
Really. Exactly. Yeah. Like HIV and AIDS as well. Yeah. Understandably.
Definitely.
It's important. It's so important. But there are other areas that are much more difficult to get funding.
Yeah.
More basic research into women's my research is mostly on women. Yes, women's pleasure, women's arousal. So understanding kind of basic questions about desire, things like that, much more difficult to get funding for.
Yeah.
In my experience.
And I've heard that there's a lot of research on like erection medication and
and a lot of research on women's drugs for women's to try and treat women's sexual desire.
Right. How's that going?
Well, I have very strong views about that. So I think
you're welcome to share that.
A lot of the research trying to develop drugs for women's sexual desire is way too focused on physiological and genital arousal, and actually I'm pretty critical of the quality of the research. Sure. And there have been 2 drugs that have been approved now.
Oh, really?
So in the last 10 years, and so I think that a lot of them, the 2 drugs that have been approved have a lot of side effects. One of them has the highest level of warning you can have with a drug, a black box warning. You're not supposed to drink alcohol at all when you take the drug.
Is it similar to like Viagra where it's more of an instant, or is it like an everyday?
It's an everyday.
Oh my God.
And it's not at all similar to Viagra. Viagra increases blood flow to the genitals. And they did start a program of research on women with Viagra, pink Viagra as it's called. And they stopped that research because they found that it did increase blood flow in the genitals, but women did not say they felt more aroused. So the newer drugs, there are various different ones, so they're not all the same, but they're looking at not at arousal, but desire. So they're centrally acting, and yes, they're taken every day. So I'm pretty critical.
Totally valid. I have friends that do a lot of work in the like libido space, not in the same way you do research, but speak a lot about it, help a lot of people with that. And one of the big things I've learned is how long it takes, like a woman's arousal cycle is so different than a man's. Like it takes I think it's like 20 minutes or something for us to often reach peak arousal. So there's never going to be a pill that just brings you there, because it's a process. Like,
it's context dependent.
Yeah, it's so context dependent. I mean, something I've learned is like, I take that long to get aroused because I'm so in my head. So I often ask for a 15-minute massage first. And then maybe I'm feeling present for the first time all day.
Yeah.
You know? And
free of distractions, free of,
Yes. And so I think that arousal for us is not something that you can, I mean, Viagra is like a more blood flow to penis erection. You know, it's very biological.
But it doesn't always lead men to say they feel more desire either. It's
just
focused on
physical.
For some men, it does,
right?
Because that's a real indicator to them that they're aroused.
Right.
The only thing about I think men often do take longer than people think too. I think there's a little bit of a simplification that men are very quick and are always ready and all of that.
Right.
And that there's research now suggesting that's not the case for not for all men anyway.
Well, and then many of them probably feel that societal narrative or pressure.
Absolutely.
I've had a lot of experiences with male partners where there's so much embarrassment and shame around not hard enough, not hard fast enough.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a lot, and I've come to have a lot of empathy and compassion because they are expected for a body part to literally change and shift.
Yeah. I've seen that even clinically when I did I don't do sex therapy anymore. When I did do sex therapy, and here actually at Indiana University, Bloomington, I used to see younger male students who just had one experience with a partner of losing their erection, and they would come into the clinic because they really catastrophized and thought, and sometimes it was one or two, and then they would avoid relationships. And actually, it was really rewarding to see them because it was an easy thing.
Yes.
To help them, kind of just giving a lot of information, right? And education.
What kind of information would you
just
give
things
them?
Like, during a sexual encounter, erections come and go. They don't, there's, if they go, it's what was in their head, talking to a partner about it, communicating about it rather than.
It's always the answer.
rather than being ashamed and not. And sometimes trying something that might help. And sometimes it was related to condoms, but a lot of times it wasn't. And it was just an experience, right?
And it was often like a one-off, but then that fear can override.
Yeah.
And then when they can psych themselves out.
Yeah.
Non-academic term, but.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you said, the expectations are really high that they will always, be ready. And even if they're feeling stressed or whatever, or unwell, too. I saw people who were come in and say they were sick and they couldn't get an erection. They're like, not surprising.
Honey, go take a NyQuil and go to sleep.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also saw that you are working on some sex ed chatbot stuff. Is that?
That's I'm collaborating with somebody in London, a great researcher actually, Tom Nederinsky, and he got funded and I was part of the team to develop a sexual chatbot for use in clinics. That study's
for what clinics?
Finished. Sexual health clinics.
Okay.
Yeah. There was one already there called Pat. That was the name of the chatbot. But we did studies looking at how it was funding that was specifically about trying to improve sexual health services for racially minoritized populations. Okay. So that's we got the funding on the call for research. And the research we did, I think, was really, really strong. We're still working on papers from that, but the study just finished last September. And so we've developed one now that is being used in clinics.
Wow.
And we got a lot of input from Black members of the community in London. I think we did really well with recruitment actually for that.
Sure.
And one of the things we learned is that hesitancy about talking to chatbots was something that we could improve the chatbot and improve that hesitancy. So
by making it more personal.
Absolutely that. Yeah. One of the things they wanted the participants, I always remember this finding because it's kind of interesting for a chatbot. They wanted the chatbot to be more empathic.
Sure.
And to have more, there's a little bit more of a like small talk at the beginning of they didn't want it to just focus on risk.
Right.
That was another big takeaway finding.
Well, there's a lot of fear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. An assumption that they were high risk. They really understandably didn't like that. So that was a cool study to work on.
That's very cool. I'm an entrepreneur by trade, and I'm very eager and curious to get into the sex tech space.
Yeah.
and this wouldn't necessarily be monetized. I've just been thinking about like, okay, youth are often going to porn for their sex education. Justin and I were talking about the limitations of sex ed in the US. And what if there was this kind of like fun chatbot interactive AI experience that differed on the age range that was like, you can ask me anything. I'm a safe space. Because I just find that I feel like a lot of problems come from people just witnessing rough sex on porn where consent isn't talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you said, with sex ed, the way it is in this country, it's different in other countries, of course, but I think people are definitely working on things like that.
Yeah, I agree.
The one we worked on wasn't targeted at young people because the call was particularly to look at racially minoritized groups, but that's also really important. Yeah. And we know that this was done in London, by the way. We know that in some communities, they were really hesitant about coming into sexual health clinics. And so the chatbot was one way to hopefully improve that. I'm sure there's going to be more research coming from that team.
If you know me and you watch the podcast, you know that I like watching porn for my self-pleasure rituals. One of my favorite websites to go to is exoafterglow.com. What I have found with mainstream porn is that a lot of it is created for the male gaze. It's a lot about the man's pleasure, and it just doesn't feel super authentic and connected. What I really love about Afterglow is that it is for everyone, and it is founded by a woman. I've actually had the pleasure of working with her here in Austin, and I love their mission. You can also find educational porn on their website called EduPorn, and there is just so much to learn and watch there. So go to exoafterglow.com and use code EXOTHEA. As you guys know, I've been very curious about anal play with my male partners, and I'm really excited to share Butter with you guys. Butter Wellness makes men's sexual health and wellness products, including this perineum massager. This applied on the perineum, which is between the ass and the penis of a man, can create prostate orgasms, which are very, very intense orgasms. In addition to that, this tool can also create extra blood flow that goes to the pelvic region. So if anybody has any issues with ED, this can also support with that. This is not to be inserted. This is for external use only. And you can get 20% off by going to butterwellness.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS. My favorite Honey Playbox sex toy has to be the Joy Thrust. What is so cool about this toy is that this part vibrates and thrusts, which stimulates the G-spot, and this end stimulates the clitoris. Their products cover a massive, wide variety of experiences and desires, and the majority of them are app-enabled. So in addition to the buttons on the toys, you can adjust the intensity of the toy on an app on your phone, which makes for really fun, spicy playtime. If you're curious about trying out app-enabled sex toys, go to honeyplaybox.com and use code SEGGS, SEGGS, for 20% off of your entire order. If you are watching or listening to this, you're probably interested in sex and or kink and are curious about finding new partners to explore things with. However, it can be difficult to find those people. The thing I love about the HUD app is that it's more than just an app. They have a community, a podcast, and a ton of education. And inside of their app is a bedroom feature, so you can select all of the things you're interested in, all of the things you want to try, all of the things you don't want to try, and that can be shown to potential future partners. So to learn more, go to hudapp.com/sextalk. That is hudapp.com/sextalk, SEGGSTALK. Yeah, I mean, even thinking about when I get STI checked, like let's say I was talking to a chatbot about it, maybe they were helping me schedule it or something. If it's like, what are your symptoms?
Yeah.
It kind of, that's where I'm going to spiral.
Yeah.
Versus like, okay, we look forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Like,
and we did change it in that way.
Yeah.
We definitely made it more empathic and more like a conversation.
Yes.
So I think we did a good job. And it is being used now in clinics.
Do you know if it's connected to OpenAI?
I don't actually. No, I think the principal investigator would be able to answer that.
That's okay.
Well, I should know that. But,
yeah, that's really cool. Another area of interest of mine actually is STIs.
Yeah.
So one of the ideas I have is lately I have a place I can go for free to get tested. However, my critique of that is that they say when you leave, we will call you if anything is positive, which I find then gives you this unknown amount of days of time and confusion.
Agree.
And then, well, when can I have unprotected sex? Like all of these questions. So I've recently started paying $150 every couple months to get full panel, everything. They text you when it's ready, when all your results come back. And what I do is I pay for it online and then I go into a lab. It's like you buy the order online, go into a lab. And I love that. However, the website I use is clunky, it's outdated, and it's fear-based. As I'm checking out, it's wanting to sell me doxy prep. It's wanting to sell me blood work. It's like trying to upsell me.
Oh, that's not good.
It's not good.
No.
And one of the times I did buy doxy prep, I'm like, I'm curious. I'm actually really happy that that's recently being used more. Yeah. But still, that's not the model I want to create. No. And my mom is a public health nurse, so I grew up learning a lot about STIs and the spread of STIs. And I just think that could be done better. Yes, so that's kind of one of my entrepreneurial ideas. Is just being that third-party middleman, not the lab, just the middleman, but it coming from a empathetic and education-focused standpoint.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like that. Needing and not knowing how long to wait. As you said about results, that's not good.
That's what they say. We'll call you if anything comes back positive. But then what?
And you couldn't check on the website?
You can check the portal, but I believe it's like, I don't know. It depends on the clinic in terms of if you'll get text notifications.
Okay. Right.
But I find that, the free ones I've often received also funding from somewhere. And so they're limited as well.
It's also a burden in terms of some people not being able to afford that too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm used
to
privileged. Britain. I'm used to the UK where all of this is free. Mm-hmm. Although, having said that, sexual health clinics in the UK have been cut back hugely.
Oh, really?
In the last several years. So,
So it's not just here where stuff's going a little haywire.
No. It's really a shame.
Cut back meaning
just financially.
Yeah, some are closed.
Yeah. Things have really changed since COVID too in terms of STI. I'm sure you know this, that so many more people are getting online testing kits sent.
Right.
And
I feel like those have their own risks. The do it at home ones, I feel like are.
That's what we heard from our participants. Yeah. They actually, in the trial I mentioned on condom intervention, they reported back in the qualitative interviews that they still would prefer to see somebody. They worried about misdiagnosis. Yes. They used that word.
Interesting.
And we kind of should have probed more and wondered what they meant, but there was still a little bit of, we're not so sure about this.
I'm not so sure
but it was
either.
Convenient.
Right.
It was very, and actually there was no choice because the sexual health clinics closed down for so long. And a day after we started recruiting for our study.
Oh boy.
Timing.
Yeah. What I don't trust with at-home samples is user error. I mean, that's what I've heard from the negative side of that is just people. Messing it up, not getting it if it's a blood prick or however they're doing it.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. What are you working on now?
So since I moved to the Kinsey, my research has shifted actually. So two of the studies that I've been working on are involving older women.
Oh, yes, cosmopolitan.
So we did a survey, the team at the Kinsey did a survey, and outside of Kinsey, on women over 60. We're still working on writing up that data. That was great.
Very needed.
Very needed, and so well done, the survey done. So we collected data in a really short space of time and a large sample.
How many people?
And I think the final one was 3,000.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's
women
right.
Between 2001
maybe. They were all 60 plus.
Okay.
But I'm not going to remember the mean age or whatever. And then there's another study I'm working on that also is women over 60. So I came from the UK where I'd been involved in an older adult sexual health study involving 6 European countries and called the Healthy Sexual Aging Project. And so I wasn't sure about doing any research. And then as soon as I joined the Kinsey, these kinds of interest really from outside. And that was true for Cosmo, for the survey.
Yes.
And for another one. And another project that I'm really excited about that's currently, we're about halfway through recruitment, is a study looking at laurels for protection.
I think I'm going to come do it. I got the little form.
It's wonderful to hear.
Yes.
Well, I'm really excited about this study. And and we are in close contact, although it had nothing to do with the design of the study, with the company and the CEO of the company. So this is an FDA-cleared product for protecting against STIs. Laurels for protection is what they're called, because there's other laurels that are not for protection. They're very sexy underwear. There's a choice of different colors and there's sheer and fitting up to 20 sizes of women as well. There, to our knowledge, I think we're right. There hasn't been a study apart from the studies that were required by the FDA for being cleared for being sold. This is the first one looking at sexual experiences. And so we found the recruitment so far going very well. We just started just over a month ago
for the Laurels.
For Laurels, and we're recruiting. Although we're in a college town,
right? We're
not recruiting only younger students. We recruited by really putting up flyers, which is kind of an old-fashioned thing to
grassroots.
Do. We've got a very sexy flyer, though.
Oh, great!
And we're recruiting women of different ages, different backgrounds. Not all university students or staff either. And so we're hoping that we're probably about halfway to have 50 women in the studies. It's still quite small.
Yeah.
But I think it's a cool study. So they're given the Laurels to take home with lube as well, and asked to practice using the Laurels. Aiming for 6 to 8 practice sessions. They're also compensated as well, so with financial money. The rate it's not a difficult study to do. There's a questionnaire at the beginning and a post-study questionnaire, and then there's event-specific ratings using the product. But
I'm confused. Can we go back to what the product is and
how the product is underwear,
right?
How it looks amazing. And feels amazing, by the way, as well. I meant to bring a product with me and I forgot. And they are protective against. So we know that dental dams for oral sex are not used. Very, very little used. So it's for, I should have said, I'm sorry. It's for oral sex and for rimming, both. Yes. Yeah.
Now I'm up to speed.
It's a really novel product.
Or I almost just wonder from a sanitary fingers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could potentially prevent bacterial spreads.
Yeah.
So I'm somebody that's suffered with bacterial vaginosis a lot.
Yeah. It's also recommended too by Laurels, by the company. For some people, they might prefer to use it during menstrual bleeding times as well.
Sure.
But they,
fascinating.
Yeah, they look and feel really good. And we've had a lot of interest in
fascinating.
So we'll see how the findings of this study turn out. But
now I'm even more excited to
we're really excited about this.
Join the study.
And it doesn't take very long, right? For women who are in the study for a short time.
Yeah. And
the questionnaires are not too onerous either. But
fascinating. Now, for the person performing oral on somebody wearing these underwear, would they be feeling like fabric on their tongue? Yeah, or that's part of the design of the fabric is for it to not.
That's something we're looking at. We're asking about experience.
What the feel
exactly. We're asking about that, and we're asking about smell, and we're asking about taste, and all of that. But the reports we've had, and even from the company as well, that are doing well, that's not been anything that's been aversive or distasteful or anything.
Wow.
So they are really.
This is cool. Yeah,
they are cool. Yeah, I couldn't wait to start. And there's a team of us working on it here in Bloomington from the Kinsey and Gender Studies both. And it's probably from the studies I've done recently the best one in terms of recruitment.
Sure. Well, I have an audience. I'll mention it. I had a few people message me, be like, "I live there," when I showed up in Bloomington, and I'll send them your way because I mean it's a great deal. Gift card and
the
free
company
underwear.
are very cool as well to work with.
Female founder?
Absolutely, yeah. And so Melanie Christor, her name is, she's the one who invented the product and everything.
Wow.
And she's great.
I could talk about, I love sex entrepreneurship. I think it's
impressive.
Huge category. I think there need to be more women in the space. I'm actually interested in creating some type of incubator or potentially a venture fund for this.
Wow,
for women.
That would be great.
Because what I've learned is that I don't want to spend the next 10 years of my life on one business. I want to support a broader vision, which is like many women getting into this space.
That is a great idea.
Yeah, it's needed.
Yes.
And
love that.
a lot of websites surrounding sex, even like I mentioned, the STI testing, they're very masculine and clunky and not user-friendly. And I'm just a design girl. I want everyone to, I want it to feel more feminine and sexy.
Yeah.
You know?
I would definitely check out the Laurel's website. They also have a big Instagram and TikTok following too. And their posts are great.
Wonderful.
They fit in that category of being sexy and fun.
I want more women in this space for sure.
Yeah.
Fun. So let's see. You did it say you've authored 200 research papers?
I don't know, around that.
I was recently giving a blowjob to a partner, and one of the things that I love incorporating into all types of play is lube. But specifically with blowjobs, I love being able to use this honeydew flavor of mochi melt because it makes it so much more fun and delicious for both parties. I also enjoy using it for penetrative sex, and in the past, I found that I can't really use flavored lube down there because it could upset my pH. However, mochi melt is pH balanced, it is food grade, and it is FDA approved, which makes it completely safe for use down there for the ladies and the fellas. If you want to try out Mochi Melt, go to mochimelt.com and use code THEA, THEA, for 15% off of your entire order. Mommy Thea recently created a profile on sensually.com, which is a sex-positive platform for people to both provide and seek out sex-positive and sensual experiences, which can take place both online and in person. They have a wide variety of creators on their platform, ranging from BDSM experts to sex coaches to escorts to erotic artists. They have it all. It is completely free to sign up, whether you want to create an account or seek out experiences. You can learn more by going to sensually.com. That is sensuali.com. I recently squirted for the first time, and it was a lot of fluid. I was surprised. I squirted like 5 times in a row the first time I did it, and everything was drenched. I spent the entire next day doing multiple loads of laundry, and as excited as I was to have squirted for the first time, I also realized that I needed a solution for the problem at hand. So I am so excited to be working with Splash Blanket. They create incredible waterproof blankets. They can be used for squirting, for sex in general. They absorb up to 1 liter of liquid. I mean, I just use mine as a cozy blanket. They are extremely diverse, and I absolutely love them. So go to splashblanket.us and use code SEGGS, SEGGS, for 15% off of your entire order. That's very impressive.
Thank you.
Very impressive.
Well, it's a long career.
Yeah. I mean,
I started in my 20s.
Yeah. When you started exploring sex research?
Yeah.
Wow.
About 26, 25.
Did you encounter criticism from family?
Yeah, that's a great question because my background is I come from a Catholic family.
That's what Justin said. I swear every guest I've had, which is 30 now.
A lot of my colleagues also have come from, Catholic background. So
it's always the flop.
Yeah. So actually, I couldn't talk to my parents for sure about what area of research I did until I finished my PhD. And then I remember that I had a great supervisor who did work on menopause. And they saw her was on the front cover of a Toronto newspaper. And that kind of changed their mind a little bit.
Oh.
But it wasn't something that they would want to talk about. They weren't interested in talking about.
So you never did you tell them you were
I did. Yeah. I did, but they wouldn't want to follow up on it.
Okay.
And then the other thing I experienced before I really did any sexuality work is when I worked on the menstrual cycle. I had the experience in one degree I did in my master's where my supervisor just really made fun of it and thought it was I had a really good supervisor from another university.
Yeah.
But the supervisor where I was at a university in Scotland was just like women's stuff. It was really embarrassed by it.
He would call it women's stuff?
Yeah, he'd call it women's stuff. And trivialize it, really. So I've never had a bad experience I'm a psychologist by background, a clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
In the psychology departments I've worked in after I finished my PhD, I've had good experiences.
Sure.
I've worked in a few universities in England, Scotland, and the US. And really, colleagues in other areas of psychology have almost always been respectful and seen the importance of the work and so on.
I find a lot of people are curious. So when I share that I have a sex podcast, it's not it's literally like hushed tones. Like, can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I always
have you
get
experienced that? Yeah. Like, even though they know you're in the realm, it's like,
yeah, I've experienced that going through immigration. When they find out you're going to a sexuality conference, they'll say, "Oh, tell me all about it." And yeah, I've had that a lot of questions.
People are hungry for it.
100%, they are. Yeah.
Well, and
even nowadays, when sex is everywhere on the internet.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm really glad to be having these conversations because my guests are often. I've had a lot of sex therapists on. I've had a lot of sex workers on. It's broad, but this is my first experience talking to a lot of researchers. And I think it's important because I don't understand a lot of the research process, but I want people to listen to all of this.
Yeah.
And
people do have questions. You're right.
They have so many questions.
Yeah. They have questions too about sometimes, do you have problems with ethical review boards getting research through? And my experience, I've worked a lot in ethics on institutional review boards myself for years, is that as long as you provide a really good rationale for why you're doing the research, and of course you do it carefully and professionally and, always with ethical concerns right up there,
of course,
then I find that I've not really had a problem over the years in different countries at having research approved. But if you just see it as a hoop to jump through and as something it's so important, and particularly in an area like sexuality. Yeah.
What are some of the main differences you notice in sexuality in the EU versus the United States?
Oh, there are. Well, the big differences are sex education. And even in the UK, which is not as good as many European countries, I'm not sure if you know this, but 2-3 years ago, they voted, and it was a conservative government, they voted for comprehensive sex education across the board in all schools, even faith-based schools and religious schools. So they're still rolling that out, but that was approved.
Do they roll out the same everywhere? The same
No. Well, there is a core curriculum.
Okay.
But in my experience, and I've heard many people talk about this, it really depends on who's teaching.
Right.
And their comfort and their
but still, I like that it's all the same curriculum, whereas in the United States, it's state by state.
Exactly. Yeah. So. And it includes things like consent now.
Oh, and so good.
I know. It's not just about condoms and putting condoms on bananas and things. But the EU, your question about European countries. So I've worked a lot with colleagues. I still do with colleagues in Western and Eastern European countries, actually, and it varies hugely. So study we did on older adults, we had countries like Portugal, very Catholic, and Croatia, very Catholic as well. And then the other countries that were involved were Norway and Denmark, so very progressive and very liberal. And the sex education there, and the Netherlands is always cited, is so much better. So there are real differences.
Okay.
But then in the research we did, we didn't find many differences between older adults' experiences.
Of what? What was the research on?
On getting older and their sexuality, aging and sexuality.
Meaning, I'm just curious so you said there weren't very many differences depending on the country.
Depending on whether it was Southern European, Mediterranean countries, if you like, and the North.
But like, was the research was on like sex drive, or
actually it was on everything.
Okay.
it was such a big survey. It was a quantitative survey, and then we also did qualitative 1-to-1 interviews in 3 countries with over 90 participants.
Okay.
And our mean age was not young old, as it said. The mean age, I think, for the qualitative studies was 74.
Okay.
And we had participants up to 92.
This is the one in collaboration. Was it in collaboration with Cosmopolitan?
No, this was completely unrelated.
Gotcha.
This was funded by the Norwegian Research Council.
Okay. So it covered a bunch. It did not differ based on the conservative or progressive.
We didn't find many country differences, which was surprising.
Yeah, absolutely.
To us. But we did find some really interesting findings, and most of them very positive, right? To do with people, and you could say that the sample were selected, but actually we did, it was representative. The survey was representative. The qualitative interviews were people that were interested, but they talked about aging, things changing with aging, their function, but that didn't necessarily mean that their sexuality was less enjoyable. And so they talked a lot about adapting to changes, getting used to bodily changes, and for the most part, still being interested. Not everybody, and not everybody sexually active either. But and they talked about frequency going down, but it wasn't the most important thing anymore. It was the quality, and it was the intimacy, and being more experimental in what they did.
I've heard that. I feel like there's a bit of like mention of that in certain media or movies, but
studies too.
Yeah, but then there's also a conflicting narrative of like the archetype of the grandma and grandpa that are just sweet and cute and like
asexual.
Yes, it's a common trope.
Yeah, it is.
And I follow a few women that are in their, I believe, 50s and 60s that talk about sex on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And they're really committed to dispelling a lot of those narratives. Yeah,
that's one of the things we wanted to do in this research as well.
Sure.
I mean, we had questions. We weren't set out to prove something, but that's what we've written about.
Yes.
And when we present on this as well, is that stereotype of the sort of sexless older adult was just not something that we found. There were some people that weren't so interested.
Yeah.
And some of them who were no longer having penetrative sex, but were still really enjoying sexual activity. And some of them, one of my PhD students did 3 studies in this group, in the sample. And she talked about the older adults, she used this expression that sex actually happening was like the icing on the cake. Because they enjoyed a lot of other things as well that were physical and sensual, but not necessarily involving penetrative sex.
Right.
And so that was a really a cool study to do with a great group of collaborators.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about people who have been in, let's say, a monogamous relationship for decades, there's actually so much safety and vulnerability there in many cases that one could also assume that the sex is getting better as they learn each other over the decades.
And some people in our study did say that in the survey as well.
Right.
And they also said, being free of having kids at home, all of that actually could make sex a lot better.
Yeah.
And they felt freer and so on. Again, not everyone, but it definitely dispels that myth around the sexless older adult.
Right. Yeah, I think that's harmful.
There's a lot more research going on now in the last, I would say, 10 years only on older adults. So I see it in terms of journal articles and submission because I edit a journal, a sexuality journal.
Yes.
And we've seen a big increase in the number of both qualitative interview studies and big surveys on older adults. It's long overdue. But it's really good to see that's growing.
What was the partnership with Cosmopolitan?
In what way do you mean?
It was a big deal in my eyes, because it came across my feed, unrelated. And I was like, oh, this is so exciting that sex is being talked about over 60 and it's like great graphics.
They definitely initiated the idea of the survey. We were quite a big group of us worked on the questions.
Cool.
They definitely had input into that, but it was us as the researchers who kind of absolutely wrote the questions. And some of them, not all of them, but some of them were based on other studies and, tried and true kind of before. What was really great about that study is there are some panels now where you can recruit from that are pretty representative, and that was true for that survey. And the other thing is, although it was a big number, I think I'm right in saying it was 3,000. It was the recruitment was done within about a week.
Wow! Because there was so much
interest in it, and
I bet.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we worked with a company that were really good, and the data was actually presented to us all clear and cleaned, as it's called.
Sexy women over 60. We're here for you.
I know. No, we were really excited by that. We were excited by that. And
I mean, I've even in my DMs on Instagram gotten questions of like, I'm not your target audience, but blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, I want everyone to feel, welcome.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot more, of course, in the media now too about older women, and that's good. But we found in the those qualitative interviews with the 90 people that they said, women in particular said they like seeing older women in the media.
Sure.
People like Helen Mirren and others, right?
Yeah.
But they thought it was overly kind of glamorized. So they liked the idea that there were women over 60 or even over 70, but they thought that they could be a little bit more true to life and realistic. That was kind of interesting too.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like so many media tropes are
Yes,
all
exactly.
in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think your work has had a tremendous impact. I'm really enjoying talking to you. What is next for you?
I would like to do more research going back to what I started my career in looking more at contraceptives.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think there's still a lot. I mean, it's still, hormonal contraceptives still, of course, used massively.
Yes.
And for many years.
Something just came out about IUD pain.
IUD pain on insertion, removal. Yeah. That's an under-researched area right there.
Yeah,
as well.
I've been seeing a lot of my feed about it.
Yeah. It is getting more attention.
I mean, I had, when I think of those insertion and removal experiences, I think of literal trauma, like horrific cervix pain.
Yeah. And a lot of women, I discovered this only last year. Well, you're not really told what happens during insertion. I didn't until a year ago when a student did a presentation in my class. That's really what happened. Wow. It was excellent.
Yeah.
And she also worked in sexual health herself. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about cervical clamping was done. I didn't know anything about that.
Oh, yeah. From what I've heard, and who knows how accurate this is, that the experience stimulates, not necessarily contraction, but like similar level
of pain.
Pain.
Yeah. No, I've also heard that. But there's been a little bit more attention, I think, to removal. I think that's a growing area. I think that what you've seen on social media, there's going to be more research.
They're just jabbing a little thing up in there.
And there's a new company in Scandinavia that have discovered, invented, had approved a new method for actually clamping that looks way less painful. I mean, just looking at it, it's not a metal thing. It uses suction. I've seen photographs of it. So there's attention being paid. Okay. But I think the whole area of contraception and women's sexuality.
Please go do studies there.
Yeah, the difficulty is funding. But where next I would really like to do further research and a bigger study as well.
Definitely.
But that's going to need some funding from.
Yeah, I had the pleasure today of going to the library and looking at some of the archives, and I'm going back.
At the Kinsey.
Yes. I'm going back for Rebecca because she's amazing.
She is.
And we only had like an hour and a half, but there was one photograph of a woman, at the gynecologist and her face and her expressions, and it was maybe taken in like the 80s or 90s, this film photo. And I'm like, that's how I feel every time I sit in that chair. It feels barbaric and outdated.
And a lot of I did a little bit of research on this on pelvic exams. A lot of younger women are just so scared before they go for a first one. And there's not enough. Again, the IUD insertion thing is a great example where you're not really told what happens.
It's traumatic.
Yeah.
I had a traumatic experience with a LEAP procedure. Mm-hmm. Removal of potentially cancerous cells on my cervix. And they use what is basically this electrocution machine. And
to burn
they didn't put me under.
Oh, yeah.
And it was deeply traumatic. And I almost went to the emergency room that night. And I mean, I looked into it almost from a legal standpoint at one point because I was like, I don't want women to go through that experience.
No. And probably not well informed before.
No.
As well.
I feel like there's almost room for this whole other person at the sexual health clinic experience, like the emotional support person. Yeah. Because the nurses and doctors are there to do their job too.
Yeah.
But
they don't always have time.
The bedside manner.
Or the bedside manner to do that. Right. Yeah, I agree.
We need the chatbot.
Yeah, that would help.
This is what's going to happen.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a chatbot on that, but that would be a good idea.
What to expect for all of these procedures.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been lovely chatting with you today.
With you. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Where can people find you or any?
So I'm on Twitter.
Okay.
And I do use Twitter quite a bit, mainly for the journal that I edit. Yeah. That's why, because it's kind of the journal one as well, although it's my name. So my Twitter handle is CY_Graham.
Okay.
_Graham.
Okay.
And I use Instagram, but not that much. It's mainly Twitter and LinkedIn.
I love that. I'm not even on Twitter.
Well, Twitter I started using a while ago for the journal, and it makes a big difference because I
reaching
basically
people for research as well, right?
Both,
Yeah.
absolutely. That less than before. That's kind of not happening as much anymore in my experience, in my research. But promoting our authors' articles and presentations at conferences, that's a big thing. And I think it's linked to better visibility for the journal as well.
Definitely.
So it's Journal of Sex Research that I
love that. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode today. Be sure to stay in touch with us on socials at Seggs Talk Radio Podcast. That is SEGGS Talk Radio Podcast.